crap. Good afternoon, friends. I'd like to welcome you today to What's in Tegan's Storage Locker. It's the show that dares to ask the question, just what is in my storage locker? The answer today, well, it's comic books. It's pretty much always going to be comic books, I can promise you. There's a little cat who likes to run around and disrupt things, and he's been very disruptive. He's already caused a couple false starts so far because I recorded 1 or 2 minutes and he's just careened into the camera. Maybe we can actually get through a recording once. I'm looking at him. He's just a couple feet away from me and he's pretending not to know it. Oh, there he is. He's looking up at me. He knows I'm talking about him. All right, let's talk about the Animaniacs here. I was all in on the Animaniacs. I was maybe a little bit too old to be all in on the Animaniacs, but a lot of people were too old to be in on the Animaniacs. People love that show. It was a great show. It was one of my mother's favorite shows. She did not watch all the stupid cartoons that I put on the TV, but Pinky and the Brain were probably like one of her very favorite things. Certainly, I think there was a period in time in the 90s where her 2 favorite shows were X-Files and whenever Pinky and the Brain were on Animaniacs. We have a pair of Pinky and the Brain salt shakers that are in a box somewhere in storage that were 2 of her most prized possessions. So we love these guys. We loved them. I still have not got around to watching any of the reboot. People said it wasn't that bad, but it also was clearly aimed at the current audience as opposed to trying to sell it to kids today. If I'm recalling the criticism correctly, which, possibly to be expected, I guess. But it was a real miracle at the time. You wouldn't have thought a show this funny would actually make it onto daytime cartoons. Because certainly my mother didn't think much of, Tiny Toons, but she quite liked the Animaniacs. So I was all in on the comic book. This is direct sales, meaning I was excited enough when I saw an Animaniacs comic that I got it on a trip to the comic book store. That's how into Animaniacs I was. Later on, I think I just was buying it at the supermarket with whatever was left of my allowance. But, I didn't go up to the comic book store every day. So I wanted this comic book because, boom, there you go. Pinky and the Brain, right on the front page. That's who we're starting with here. Amy Weingartner writing. These aren't familiar names. Neil Sternicki. They probably did 50 issues of Looney Tunes or something. Those titles, Looney Tunes. They put out a regular Looney Tunes book every month for decades. No one reads it. It has a pretty stable creative team, I think, and yet it must be servicing an audience. The market right now is supporting 2 Scooby-Doo books, 2, and it's been supporting more than 1 for a while now. That's interesting. That material is coming in handy for them somewhere. So, people still make cartoon books to this day. People do not still make a reboot. There were a lot of people who were very upset about that. I never really saw this show because this was on ABC, wasn't it? I was by '95. Man, I was Fox Kids all the way. Fox Kids Saturday morning block. That was who had the X-Men. That was who had the Tick. 2 of the most popular shows in my household. And these guys were running on the daytime. Although Pinky and the Brain did have a Saturday morning cartoon, which I want to say was a mix of skits from Animaniacs and original ones, but I don't remember off the top of my head. It was also, Saturday mornings was Tasmania. Maybe not remembered as much. It actually... It was sort of set apart from, any of the other Warner Brothers shows from the period. And it had a really interesting sort of vaguely primetime sensibility in some ways. They had a few meta episodes, so to speak. And I'm not going to, there's a lot of words on the page here. And, they're doing their best, I'm sure, to try and replicate these, wonderful voice performances that even when this comic was launching, people would, already be familiar with, because, they're classic. Maurice LaMarche, I don't remember who does Pinky, I'm very sorry. He's actually, I've been following him on Twitter for years, I think. Oh, God, they always put Aerosmith ads all over comic books. That they must have done really well with that demographic. They're going to a punk clothing store. I don't know what they're doing. Are they pretending to be rock and rollers? Never underestimate the gullibility of the American public. Well, you see, there you go. Oh, they're roadies. Are they pretending to be roadies, and then they're going to go? Yeah, they're going to go on stage. Okay. These were the year one annuals for this year. This year's annual theme. I actually read this Man of Steel annual on the TikTok channel a few months ago, because it's got Jean-Paul Leon art, and it is gorgeous. You've never seen it because it's a rando Superman annual. And I don't remember this. I probably got it because I like Robin, but Armstrong, that doesn't sound like familiar. Had a Wieringo cover, though, so that's a nice cover. All right, so our boys are on stage here. They're pretending to be rock and roll stars. And then things go wrong with the performance, so he has to give a hymn. What did famous Greek scholar Euripides say when he tore his trousers? Where's Eumenides when I need him? It's the... So, and then Pinky has to fill the time on a dead stage, and he doesn't do a very good job of that. And was that the... How to draw comics? Oh, man, this was still the Gary Brodsky stuff. I wonder if this is... Because they put out... Soulson Comics, put out a whole lot of how-to comics. That was actually a pretty big market presence to judge by how many they published of them. And they weren't the only one. How to Draw stuff was really popular there in the 80s at the time. And Soulson put out a bunch of different ones. And I wonder if this is just those with a hard spine on them. They're bundled together with a hard spine on them. That'd be very interesting. Something to look out for in the bins. Yeah, I buy Soulson. Whenever I see it, I buy Soulson. That is my priority as a critic and a collector. I noped out on Sovereign 7. I bought I was excited about it. I remember, like a lot of people, I was really excited about Chris Claremont's return. And then I fell off about issue maybe 3, maybe 4. I don't know. It was a bit oversold. People wanted it to be better than it was. And the funny thing is later on, in an annual or a special or something, they did a Pinky and the Brain appearance. I think it was in Shadow. But I remember that because by then I had demoted Sovereign 7 to, I'll read it in the supermarket when I'm waiting for my mother. So I don't know what they're up. They're up to hijinks. They're up to wacky hijinks. So who is this? This is Bobby Weiss, Neil Sternicki, and Richard Maurizio. Colors Tom Zucco. There's the one name I think might stick out if you're paying attention to anything. But a lot of these creators don't. I don't recognize the names. Maybe I just didn't pay attention to the names in these books. So they summon up a genie with a little bit of sass. And maybe they could be a little bit more racy in a comic book than on the cartoon. Although they got fairly racy for any kind of cartoon. Batman was racy. They let Batman get a little bit racy. The Batman animated series, still my absolute favorite thing about this show after all these years, is just that passing joke where I think Harley Quinn's pretending to be a lawyer or something, and she makes a joke just, I want to say to Harvey Bullock about a small subpoena. And I tell you, that still to this day, I cannot believe they got that past anyone. And it's still like just the most classic line in the whole series. It was all around. It didn't just look nice. It wasn't just well animated. It was written really well. Triumph. Oh, this thing. Well, it's a Christopher Priest. He put his name on some rather benighted comics over the years. Oh, there I go again. I'm better at it, though. You have to admit, I'm better at it since I started trying to make a conscious effort of it. So this guy's whole deal was essentially, there I go again. Yeah. Essentially, he was Sentry, better part of a decade early. He was a member of the Justice League who was forgotten due to some temporal hijinks, I don't remember. And around the time of 0 Hour, they made a push for him as, I want to say, a founding member of the Justice League who just disappeared, and then he's coming back to the present. So you see the similarity, why I would say it was an early iteration of that Sentry idea of planning someone into a series history. And the Avengers very consciously, I think, did a riff on that in I want to say No Surrender was the name of that. It was the one with Rogue leading the whole team, and it was fantastic. It is a great Avengers story. And I realize I'm pretty far afield, but that's the first iteration of that character type, the implant. It's always good for milking some pathos there. They were still printing the CBG award on a full page. I wonder if these were paid for. That's interesting. I guess I just assumed they weren't paid for. But were they paid for? Oh, they have it's a Chicago Comic-Con. Maybe the Chicago Comic-Con paid for it. That seems more reasonable. Was that where they gave them out? See, I don't remember. I bought CBGs for the last near decade of its existence. I didn't buy it when it became a monthly magazine, though, and I probably wasn't the only one. And it was nice getting that thick CBGs, because you knew that was gonna take you like at least an hour, 2 hours, just sit back, reading CBG. And that's sort of what I think some of the early blogs tried to replicate, that tone, but maybe it sifted out of the fan culture after a while. All right, so here's another, he's doing the inflation thing, which they're having fun. They're whacking zany hijinks. Oh, and it's 1492, the true story. Well, probably closer than what they were teaching when I was still young in school. Writer Dave King, penciler George Wildman, that name I recognize. Inker Scott McCrae. Sponsored by Isabella and Ferdinand. That's true enough, I guess. Oh, and they're disrupting history. Interesting, because the guy is Yakko, Wacko, and Dot there. They look pretty much just like they stepped out of the cartoon, but the rest of the figures are sort of interesting. They don't look like the Animaniacs house style. That's kind of a fun effect right there. Later on, they actually did an interesting one that I took some photos of, and I might end up doing it on the channel someday. That was wholly black and white in the style of popular manga. Kind of crazy that the whole issue, they just did it that way. Oh man, I hated this. Conduit. In hindsight, I should have noped out on Conduit. I didn't like that guy, and that was a sign that they were maybe starting to run with half or less of a tank after the high of those first few years following the death of Superman. I think this was a good couple years after, because they'd already done Dead Again, and I thought Dead Again was great, and it was basically just a sequel to the death of Superman, but it was great. You probably don't even remember it, but it ran for a few months, and there was a hoax about, is Superman dead or not? Is the person who came back the real one? And it kept me going week to week. It was a really good read. And yet, it sort of felt like after that, they struggled to come up. The Trial of Superman had its moments. It was interesting, I think. Well, I'm getting I'll pick something out of the Trial of Superman. That's an interesting period. I think that's when Ron Frenz started working for the books around that time. His only major DC run, and yet he came over and had a significant amount of Superman comics under his belt from the mid-'90s. I don't think he's gone back to the character. He's, still working. So, I don't know how to thank you crazy kids. Yeah, good job. Oh, he took him to California instead. Well, either way, Clarissa Ladd, back when, that was the demographic. And wow, boy, I hated this film. I'm going to be completely honest and completely negative. My family, we went to see this film because we always went to see the big sci-fi films in the theater. That was the kind of family we were. And we hated this one. We thought it was just really poorly put together. And it was so beloved. It spawned a media empire. So I can't always call them. So this is, they were pushing to all the formats: Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Game Gear, and Game Boy. And look for Stargate Video on home video from Live Entertainment. Let's look at an issue of the Star brand here. Not just any issue of the Star brand, but the later run of the Star brand. I will recommend the early run of the Star brand. Of all the New Universe titles, and there is good work. If you look at, go right now to your computer and look up Night Mask, who drew the 12-issue run of Night Mask. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not even going to give you a hint. Just go and look and tell me. That isn't a pretty stacked comic book. You could, to this day, you shouldn't pay more than 50 cents for an issue of Night Mask. But there was interesting stuff throughout the line. Not, the high wattage, big blockbuster that it needed to be. But there was some interesting stuff, especially on the back end. And this is an interesting comic book. Is it a good comic book? I don't know. It's definitely a comic book that was made, at least partially, from a position of spite, because after Jim Shooter left the company, they blew up Pittsburgh because Jim Shooter was from Pittsburgh. So they were in a spiteful mood. What are you doing? He's in a spiteful mood. But the interesting thing about that is because there was still enough gas in the tank that they could get a couple years, for a couple of the books, a couple more years out of just throwing everything at the wall. The world outside your window was out the window. They were just going for a complete alternate present, basically. What if superheroes appeared and I flung the comic across the table? What if superheroes appeared and things kind of went downhill really fast because of it for the world? That's an interesting idea for a fictional universe. That's not the idea they set out with, but it's sort of the idea where they ended up, which is kind of interesting in hindsight, you have to admit. But the problem with this is that John Byrne, he drew a couple comics. Go look at Legends. There's a whole section in there making fun of the New Universe. He didn't write that comic, but he was part of the creative team that made it, along with Wolfman? No, Wine. Man, I'm sorry, I can't remember all, like, 5 people who were part of the brain trust on that one. Point being, he had made his feelings on the matter known. So he inherited Jim Shooter's baby. And he did, he blew it up. He blew it up and turned it for the last, I don't know, I think it only lasted like half a dozen issues after that. But he turned it kind of weird. It started off as definitely a book about someone who was from reality, someone who was from the normal world, suddenly dealing with the intrusion of something really weird. And that original concept, that original run of Star Brand, is still an interesting run of comic books. And to be fair, I don't think there's anything in this run as much as what happened was influenced by real world circumstances. The fact is, the comics weren't selling. They had to do something, and making everything weird for a while got what juice there was to get out of that orange. Because this is admittedly, this is John Byrne, Chris Ivey, Tom Morgan. It's not bad inkers. Rick Parker on letters. Interesting work, considering that it's just straight up weird science fiction stuff, a universe away from where this comic started. But they blew up Pittsburgh and they pushed every sci-fi element in the books pretty much as far as it could go. And the books got interesting. Yeah. The world has never had to deal with anything like this before. Nothing in human history comes close to what happened in Pittsburgh. Not Krakatoa. Freudian slip there. Not Hiroshima, not Nagasaki. Maybe not even Sodom and Gomorrah. So basically this was a disaster of biblical proportions, out of the blue, that thrust the world into war, into instant world war. And so everything got shaken up. The superheroes got drafted. And they got to tell really weird superhero stories like this. Some baby. Is this Kim Connell baby? I don't remember. But basically, he has to fix the hole in the world that's just getting, and there's a weird single gigantic life form that's apparently coming out of the pit. Yeah, see, weird stuff. Here's all the people who died during the pit. They're just like preserved in this sea that was created. Oh, come on, you. All right, so I went and pointed the laser pointer around in the dark room for a minute, and he got sick of it, but it held his interest for a couple minutes. So who knows? Perhaps we've put him off for a few more moments. So it's just really weird sci-fi stuff happening with this green tentacle plant thing that's starting to reach outside of the pit. And then there's this cosmic baby just flying around doing cosmic baby stuff. Wow. I don't know what's going on. He's fixing it. He's fixing killing the creature, fixing the problem, I guess. Death, where is thy sting in 60 days? When they were still doing, they quit doing bi-monthly books for the most part. I think when the 90s turned over. This was one of the very last. Cloak and Dagger was another. Why do I remember these things? So here we have Eric Siri. I want to say he was an editor. Maybe I'm thinking of Mark Siri. Rod Ramos, Don Hudson. Colorist. He was a colorist. That may have been where there's Mark Siri, so maybe there's a relation there. He was, I want to say, an editor at the time. That's why I recognize the name. Howard Mackey editing. Tom DeFalco, editor-in-chief. So looks like, this is a character who was in DP7 2-3. Yeah, but DP7 was without a doubt the most developed book. Mark Grunwald and Paul Ryan did, I think, every issue of that 32-issue run. The other books, I don't think any of them, the 4 lasted, I think, almost 3.5 years or so. No, 2.5 years, I'm sorry. I'm doing math in my head. I was a humanities major. Be kind to me. And the other eight launch books, 4 were canceled after the first year. And the other 4 that made it, I think they all made it to 30. No, 3 of them made it to 32. And Starbrand sort of petered out this strange existence as a bi-monthly book that got really weird. And then, I don't know, this reads British to me. There's too much happening on this page. This reads like something you'd see in the back of one of those British War annuals that I get whenever I see in the secondhand pile. Not very damn often in this country. But you find interesting things. I found a pile of Scottish Christmas comics a while back in Sacramento that I never would have guessed I'd find in this country. So sometimes you find weird stuff. You find interesting things when you look. And I don't even think I have 16. No one was buying them. I'm sure they had fairly small print runs for Marvel stuff. I've never saw them in a quarter box. I don't have the whole, like I say, I don't have, I think, all of the New Universe because some of the later stuff sold so poorly you don't see it in quarter bins very often. The early stuff especially, even as early as 15 years ago, I remember seeing swaths of it still clogging quarter boxes all over the country. But by this time, they were down to Justice, which completely revamped itself after the first half. DP7, Cyforce, which I want to say also changed considerably. I've never seen any of the later part of Cyforce because no one was buying it enough to end up in the quarter boxes, like I say. But they were all, what I do find, they were all drafted, and there's this really weird one-shot from the very last part of the run called The Draft that's basically just about all the superheroes getting drafted by the government to go fight and probably die in a world war. Very weird, very weird. They were swinging for the fences. Excalibur was launching. Weird to think that the New Universe struggled to survive long enough to see the advent of Excalibur. They seem like 2 different eras, and then they are. So, yeah, on sale this month. Justice kept going, I think. DP7, they still had a better part of a year, because I think they lasted to 32. These 3 managed to hold on to that much of a readership. Oh, and I guess they were having a crossover with Cyforce. Justice was early Peter David and early Lee Weeks? Was it Lee Weeks? I'm trying to remember. And here's the Universe. They had their own bullpens, but they had their own bullpen bulletins. And so they had stuff like official timeline, profile of all the creators. Yeah, they really thought they probably had a devoted readership. They tried. I love the New Universe. I have a lot of affection for it. And here's an ad for Speedball, which we've read on this show. The first issue of it, at least. All right, so what's next here? What do we got? How about... Okay. We need to do something. We need to do something with more commercial appeal here. So why not an issue of Batman? That I was just going through one of the boxes tonight when I was putting together a pile, and I saw that I had a good couple inches of shadow of the bat, and I flipped through them and realized the whole run. They changed artists every arc. The writer stayed the same. And so they had Alan Grant working with this issue, Liam Sharp. I found a John Paul Leon arc, which I'm probably going to read somewhere at some point. And I bought the book. It was a good book, but I don't remember it that, there was a lot of Batman coming out. So I don't really remember this. Liam Sharp drew an issue of Shadow of the Bat that I bought, and yet somehow I do not remember it at all. Oh, and Jamie Delano was doing a man. I think I remember seeing this because it's painted by John Bolton. That's enough to. Oh, and it's Elseworlds. See, now there's nothing on that ad to scream Elseworlds, so maybe it gets weird. A 3-issue Elseworlds, a miniseries about genetic engineering, age-old enemies, and Marilyn Monroe. I don't know. It's probably at least worth looking at because Jamie Delano he at least wrote interesting comic books. A bit dry sometimes. John Bolton, everything he's done was worth looking at. So Alan Grant, as I said, Liam Sharp, as I said, working with Joe Staton. Think about that. Liam Sharp doing layouts, Joe Staton doing finished pencils, with McCarthy, Boyd, Hama. Which are you going to tell us their first names? There could be a few McCarthys. No, I think that's the only credits. Yeah, see, they were doing these credits pages back then. It's not like they started doing them recently. Your first page should draw you in. You pick this off the shelf to look at it, to see if you want to buy it. What's the first thing you're going to do? Well, you're going to look at the cover. But the cover is no representation of what's inside, so what's the first thing you see? Well, first thing you see is not even a table of contents. I'll accept a table of contents occasionally for annuals and the like, but just a credits page. And you're wasting this real estate, the precious gift of a splash page when you open the comic book and it's just credits. I'm sorry, I will die on that hill. I will die on that hill. I don't care what you say about whatever's changed in the comics industry. You're still trying to get people to pick up the comic book. And the way they're going to do that is when they open it up and they see something that pulls them in. If this had been the first page, maybe it's a quiet first page, but still establishing shot, some weird looking dude on a rock, it establishes the thing. So okay, this is going to be about a rock star. Interesting. So this guy's going to blow up. Is he trying to kill the rock star? Kill the rock band? This is kind of weird because this is definitely a Liam Sharp drawing, and Joe Staton is finishing in a very weird. I don't know. It's hard to describe. When some of these older artists in the '90s tried to draw and tried to ink, like how the kids were doing it, like sometimes Scott Williams, but more commonly you'd see like a lot of the textures you saw in Rob Liefeld's work, working with his weird textures, working with his inkers. And this is interesting. This is good. This is a well-inked comic book. You can tell it's inked by an older talent who was genuinely trying to see what worked about the new material. And so that's why it at least looks decent. It doesn't look completely out of place on Liam Sharp, who was, even though he was still at Marvel in 1995, pretty close to cutting edge. He was doing an arc on Batman. He was drawing the Hulk around this time. He earned his stripes on that Marvel UK material. People liked Death's Head too, not enough to keep buying his book past like 1994, but people liked that book for that hot moment that made him a name. Oh wow! Now, do they tell kids today about the Jerky Boys? They've gutted our school system. I don't know if something like the Jerky Boys would still be on the curriculum, and that I don't like that. Kids should know. Kids should be wary. Every time they answer that phone, kids don't answer the phone. They'll tell you it's because of robocalls. But people are still, it's still low-key afraid of the Jerky Boys. Like, you go to that phone, I don't recognize the number. It could be someone trying to sell me something. Could be someone pretending to hold my nana hostage. Or it could be the Jerky Boys. None of these are good options. They probably have a podcast somewhere that's run for like 900 episodes. MTV Sports. And MTV was, their programming was doing well enough that they were able to put out VHS tapes of the MTV Sports stuff. There was a lot of the MTV Sports stuff. Because they basically did anything that was too bad for like ESPN3 ended up on MTV Sports. I think, didn't they have like, oh no, I think it was ESPN3 that had Magic the Gathering. I'm trying to remember. One of them had Magic the Gathering in the 90s. Video Music Awards, select performances. That might be fun to have on. All right, meanwhile, back to the show. I've given a little public service announcement about the Jerky Boys. So yeah, it's about a rock band. So you get to see Liam Sharp sort of giving us these weird characters. And you can imagine how it would look like if he inked it. But it's also a real trip seeing his work because he does. He inks and finishes his work stuff, and I think he's multimedia now because you pick up one of his comic books and he still draws a number of different styles, sometimes in the same book. That's why I really love that Starhenge book. I hope he does more. He just finished a run on Exo Manowar, of all things. He just finished it up. I need to sit down and read the whole thing. Becky Cloonan writing it. He's still one of my favorite artists. And he was great. He was great in the 90s. He really matured fast after, Death's Head. Oh, White Wolf. White Wolf was putting a lot of ads in comic books around this time. I remember seeing a lot of ads. They got me to buy the one Elric book, and I've said this before, complete blind spot. I just bounced off at the one Elric collection I got from White Wolf based, I think, on these ads. I just bounced off it at the time. And it wasn't like dry prose was too much for me because it was the age where I was really getting into Lovecraft. I had a Lovecraft period. But I just bounced off of this guy. And then I think I got sidetracked trying to read The Wheel of Time. And I got bogged down in book 7, and I never picked it up again. I had meant to, but did I really mean to? House of Blues had a TV show. I remember tuning into this every once in a while because they had They Might Be Giants. That would have been worth it. John Lee Hooker, Tom Jones. Yeah, see, there would have been a few of these worth. I probably would have tuned into Hootie and the Blowfish. I loved Hootie and the Blowfish. Do not even talk to me about Hootie and the Blowfish. I listened to that CD so much. I was that person. I don't know why, but I love those guys. I even tried to love the later albums for my sins. I think we've proven on this show, if anything, that I was not smart with my money as a child. Why would someone shoot their roadie? Drugs? Well, that was my first thought. That is a pretty wicked Batman, you gotta admit. Very much in, him working with Joe Staton seems to anticipate someone like Doug Mankey or Jason Fabok's another one. Very, very much in this mold. This very precise over-rendering with that isn't quite the native line that Liam Sharp would use. Because Liam Sharp is very versatile. He can do a number of different types of ink line. But he wouldn't do quite like this. And I think it's very interesting because it's a nice looking comic book. It's not a bad matchup. It's actually a very thoughtful matchup. Joe Staton, he brings a little bit to this. There's a bit of a Joe Staton stiffness. That's not a criticism. He comes from a very down the middle, Bronze Age, but absolutely 100% solid mentality. So it looks good. It looks interesting. If you're a Liam Sharp fan, this does not look like any other Liam Sharp comic book. Gets a little bit sketchy here towards this part. Interesting, like, you know, Joe Staten putting a very interesting line on this page. Here's more of those year one annuals. I guess this is from the same period. The Green Lantern. I think I looked at these in another video. I probably have that one. Probably don't have that one. Probably want to look for that one in a quarter box, though, because it's got Wagner and Geis on it. Inexplicably. Oh, wow. Didn't we just look at a comic book that ended with... I know we did. Yeah, we just read another comic book that had almost an identical... I didn't do that on purpose. Whoa, this comic's a little bit taller than this one, too. It's a good 1/8 of an inch. Wow, that's weird. I did not plan that. That's kind of fun. Run and tell your mother. Please go and tell all your friends about this show, so that people can watch it, so that people can see, so the children can know. Tell all your friends. Send the links to every person you trust. Wow. I know this guy probably never appeared again. He's very much a one-off villain for a Batman comic, but that's wow. They put their back into that one, and that's a nice page too. And he got away, and I don't know if this guy ever did anything more, or that villain ever did anything more. That's a funky looking Batman. Next month, the Cat Pack. I don't remember the Cat Pack at all. Catman and Woman. I know I bought it because I was buying Batman pretty religiously by this time. They had good people on the Batman books. We've looked at Kelly Jones, Batman from around this time. I liked the team on Detective and Robin. I was all in. I was. Joey Marchese. Now, there was a Joey Marchese letter in another book we looked at the other day. Man, I miss when the letters pages were just 3 columns of tiny type. Probably not everyone read the letters, but those who did appreciated the thought. Now this, if you want a good example of 90s burn, this Marvel DC crossover, Darkseid versus Galactus, primo stuff. Excellent. Recommend, definitely. All right, what do we got? All right, we got enough time for maybe a couple if we're quick. What is there? What is there? Okay, here's one. Captain America. Not just any Captain America. Yep. Heroes Reborn. Captain America. Which, as you can see, I purchased. Because I bought Captain America. I was a Captain America person. I haven't much cared for Captain America the last few times I've looked into it, but for years, Captain America was a book I bought month in, month out. I like the character. I still like the character. So this is still Rob Liefeld. He did the first 6 issues. Jeff Loeb writing. Jeff Loeb is writing a lot. He was writing from some books for the X offices as well. He was all over the map at this point. He had a decent run on Cable, if I recall correctly. Cable actually appears in the 6th issue of Captain America. It's the first crossover between the regular Marvel Universe and the Heroes Reborn universe was that appearance of Cable, which they just gave to Rob, I guess, because it didn't really have any impact, I think, on anything else that happened in the Heroes Reborn story. So I was looking at this and realizing there is one notable thing about this book, and there was one character who took off from Heroes Reborn, and that was this version of Bucky, Ricky Barnes. People really liked her, and she was a good character. She was interesting. The one thing you can say about this run is they had the chutzpah to give Captain America new Bucky, and they made, totally a version of the Robin that you see in Dark Knight. You got your grim and gritty hero, you give him a spunky teenage girl to keep his feet on the ground. That's how they do it with Wolverine from the very beginning. And, it's still very much Rob Liefeld, plot pencils, Jeff Loeb writer. Siebel and Stucker don't necessarily, maybe they were just Extreme Studios guys. I don't remember. So it's Rob Liefeld at his most Rob Liefeld. And for a lot of people younger than me, that's going to be no sale. And I understand that. I understand that completely. If you weren't there, it can be hard, I think, to see with fresh eyes just how big a deal it was. And whether you loved him or hated him, if you were around at the time, you will have to acknowledge he was a big deal. He changed the way a good part of the industry drew comics for a long time to come. And that is not something that very many people can say at all. Now, is that a good thing? It's one thing to say he was important. He was interesting in hindsight. I look back, and lately I've been watching a lot of Fist of the North Star. And you watch Fist of the North Star for any period of time, and you see right off that story, that character, those characters were elemental to Rob Liefeld. And you go and read it in interviews. Yeah, he'll say, Fist of the North Star. I knew all about that. And he's very upfront. And you go back and you look and, see, it's right there. Down to the character design, the anatomy even, very influential. And now you can look back and see, oh, wow. That's where that energy is from. That is ultimately the source of where he got that. And that's what he's trying to do in a superhero comic book. Is he succeeding? Well, I don't know. Your mileage may very well vary. Maybe you like the guy. Maybe you were around at the time and you remember. And I'm not saying I like everything he's done, but I remember a time when I bought comic books just because he drew them. So I try to be kind to myself. Try to see it through those eyes, because those eyes made him the superstar that he undeniably was for a time. And he knew how to tell a story by guiding your eye around the page. He understood that at all times. You look at his layouts, absolutely impeccable. He was an influence on Mignola. Mignola and him worked together on that issue of X-Force, and I will go to my grave, I will swear on Bibles, he was influenced by those layouts, by seeing how Liefeld laid out a comic in the most stark terms. I think that influenced his turn in the early 90s. It eventually led to the mature Hellboy style. And, it's completely 100% readable stuff. It sounds like I'm defending him. I'm pointing out the virtues, how it was important. And I don't necessarily think that the people who came after him, many of whom were frankly superior artists, who were trying to figure out what was working about this guy. And a lot of them took things like the inking texture, like I was saying. And that made comics look kind of weird for a while. Because if you're going to look at Rob Liefeld and take anything, you take his layouts, you take his basic storytelling. It's not John Buscema. I think it's simpler than John Buscema. It's taking some of that, Fist of the North Star energy and trying to put that in here. And you see, if someone I think, tried something that was influenced by that energy today, I think there's a lot of room for that. I don't necessarily see that, not this, but the energy from something like, the seinen that I've been watching a lot of. Fist of the North Star, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I don't see that energy necessarily in American comics in the way that you could see the energy of what was happening in Japan as early as, Rob Liefeld, certainly by Joe Madureira, Frank Miller, obviously. Is this a jet ski? This is a jet ski simulator. And there's who I was talking about, the Ricky Barnes character, who they did bring over. I want to say she is still just bumming around the regular Marvel universe. That probably hasn't been seen in years, but I don't think she was killed or anything. She may have been part of some event in the last few years that I don't remember because I was on sabbatical. But I don't think she was in the Brubaker run, and that was pretty influential. So, I don't know, he's got her tied up to a bomb. Captain America's going to save the day, of course. There you go. That's a old school image touch for you. Got to flip the comic. You don't see that so much nowadays. I ask any comic book artists listening to these words, do a flip spread. Those are fun. It'll annoy your editor, but if it's good enough, they probably won't break it up. They're awesome. Editors used to hate him though, apparently. But they kept him in because they were popular. Rifts. Do they still have rifts? I don't know. So they're going for the detonator or something, and I don't know. Is this the Falcon? I'm not paying that much attention to I'm not going to try to pay attention to what's happening in the story. You can't make me. God bless America. Well, there you go. They got to say that at some point. Oh wow. Next, Cable. See what I was saying? That is kind of a wild, a wild Nick Fury. You have to admit. And it definitely looks like something straight out of Fist of the North Star. Towards the end, when the end of the first part at least, when it gets really sci-fi, really quickly. Tom Brevoort, I wonder who did, that's not, oh, no, that's designed by Comicraft. They don't tell you who did that. I wonder if he did that himself. Adventures in the Bullpen, so they're talking about a party. Valentine's Day party. At the Marvel, man, I bet you office parties were fun in 1997. But they were putting out some interesting books. They were making one of their periodic attempts at a regular cop book, the Code of Honor. They would try again in the early 2000s. Never have been able to make a go of a regular cop book in the Marvel line. They tried a few times. Fantastic Four #6, so that was, Jim Lee was still doing it. He didn't do the whole 12 issues. Marvel Valentine's Day special. I don't remember that. I don't think I got that. It's got Mark Buckingham, Kyle Hotz, Dan Lawless, Dan DeCarlo. Okay, that's one to pick out of the bins if I find it. Dan DeCarlo, every now and he did a couple pinups here and there. One of his last works was a pinup in a X-Men Unlimited. That is a Rogue story. That's probably why I remember it. Man. They were still doing the Star Trek Voyager. I never picked up any of these Star Trek comics. The art didn't look that great on them. I don't remember who drew them. Mike Wieringo on Sensational Spider-Man, so that would have been one of the Marvel books to buy alongside the Carl Kiesel and Gene Colan. Gene Colan did almost, I think, a full year of Daredevil in the late 90s. No one knows about it because no one was buying Daredevil at the time. But late period, Gene Colan drawing Daredevil for a good year. He draws Omega Red. Think about that. There's a comic book in this world where Gene Colan draws Omega Red, and you've never seen it. All right. So, an interview with Scott Lobdell. Let's just pass over that. Thunderbolts. That was a book I was all in on. I think I even had it spoiled, the big twist spoiled before I got it, and I still loved it. You know, it's going to happen. I want to say I got it off the newsstand, so, you know, that'll happen. Carlos Pacheco takes on the X-Men. I think we read at least one issue of this. I'll probably pull out another issue at some point because, like I say, this had the Hand, Hellfire Club, Shang-Chi, and the Kingpin. So, pretty packed. And the subscription form had shrunk considerably by this period. Oh man, now I want some Mike and Ikes. They still sell them. And as I mentioned the other day, there was only one bit of merchandising, I think, from the Hulk that acknowledged this era on the book, and then they never ever did anything with it again. And those characters, for the most part, have been completely fallow. Even though there were a few characters they probably could have bolted out for this or that reason. Just didn't happen. All right, well, we got a few more minutes here. What do we want to look at in our last few minutes here together? How about an issue of Gru? We all know Gru. We love Gru. I did a big article on Sergio Aragones for the Journal last year. I'm super proud of it. I'll put up a picture of it on the screen here so that you can go track it down if you haven't read it. It turned out really well. Everyone loved it. It was a really popular piece because everyone loves Sergio Aragones. And anytime I saw Sergio Aragones and I was buying comic books, he was coming home with me, without question. So he was at Image for a year, only a year. He went to Dark Horse after that, I think. And he's been at Dark Horse ever since. Even though there's no back list available. I think the most recent series might be released in trades, but there should be a huge series of Gru books somewhere for sale in your comic book store. And they've never put together any real attempt at a modern trade paperback program for it. They don't like omnibuy, from what I understand. Sergio is down on the format, but you got to bite the bullet, man, and meet people where they are. This work should be in print. Everyone should love Sergio Aragones. But the fact is, Gru has been out of print. If Gru is still in print, I think more people would understand. I'm not saying he's obscure by any means, but Gru should be more famous. Gru should be a famous character in his own right, and he's not. He's a buried treasure, and he shouldn't be. There should be big, fat Gru books in every Barnes & Noble across the country and every school library. Because it's great. It's humor. It's not... He goes a little tiny bit blue every now and again, more than you probably remember. But for the most part, it is... I guess the demographic would be early YA, because it's a little bit pitched a little bit older than like the Star books, but it's still a humor book. So it maybe had a slightly younger demographic in mind. And, it was the Mad Magazine crossover, and I'm sure Marvel, see, there you go, every now and again. And you'd see, because, little eyes can see these things, little cartoon breasts would sneak by on the old newsstand Gru as well. And, Sergio just gets away with it because that's Sergio. He can he can get away with putting a naked woman in a comic book. No one's gonna say anything about it if it's just a little Sergio drawing in the corner. He's really, that's why what I wrote about in that article. He occupies a unique niche in the comic book ecosystem. There's never anyone like him, and there'll never be anyone like him. And this, I'm not really paying any attention because it's just, it's good. You know that if you sit down and read it, it's going to be funny. You're going to laugh a number of times. There's never been an issue of Group printed that I didn't laugh a decent, good laugh at least a few times. And the jokes are always bad, but it is frighteningly consistent. And he's dealing with these lizard people so this was... See, people underestimate Gru actually talked his way out of more problems than you think, because his reputation basically allowed him to go anywhere he wanted. So every now and again he did end up talking his way out of things. But then he would end up, so this is a immigration parable. There you go. Because the book was actually about things. It's all, nested in fantasy trappings and fairy tale tropes. But they would usually have real issues at the heart of whatever their, political allegory was. Definitely a big believer in, political allegory in comic strips. To this day. So, and here's some of these Gru potentates sitting around probably wondering what they're going to do with the problem, and then Gru has some sort of solution. I don't know what's going on. The plot just zigs and zags however it goes. And it even ends with a moral. Treat those who outrank you well. You never know when they will outrank you. Treat those you outrank well. You never know when they will outrank you, sorry. Well, those are words to live by. See, and it's corny as hell. It would be insufferable from anyone else but Sergio Aragones. And these wonderful letters pages that being an image meant they could do a 3-page letters page, and they were always a little bit passive aggressive. That was the fun. And they'd write in with their questions, and he gives snappy patter, and they're talking about reissuing the life of Gru in a new format, in a new size. See, all this Gru material. They did a couple Gru graphic novels. It's all just out of print. Mark Evaner's talking about something or other. And here's some ads for other Image comics. Ripclaw 3. We're probably going to do Ripclaw at some point because I want to say it had early Brandon Peterson on it. That's what it says. They were usually pretty good about getting the person who was in the ad to draw the comic. Alan Moore, Tony Daniel. Maybe not the least well regarded. Todd McFarlane, Alan Moore book, that would probably be the Spawn Wildcats. But I don't remember anything about that. I have this in a book next to my foot, so I will probably read it one of these days here. But I don't remember anything about this other than Alan Moore and Tony Daniel. Can't beat that. And, of course, your back page. Here's Roberto. Oh, and here's... There's always... These aren't his. That's the joke. Lots of jokes about parenthood being a drag in these dog strips. Specifically. Okay, so we looked at 5 comics. We looked at We looked at Batman, we looked at Captain America, we looked at John Byrne and Rob Liefeld, Liam Grant, and Sergio Aragones. It's a nice mix and match of this, that, and the other thing. And the little man calmed down after a certain point. So I'd like to say, if you stuck with me this long, please go over to the Patreon. I got free downloads there for you. Tons of free stuff to download, including a new 20,000-word ebook with my music writing in it. Available for you. All you got to do is subscribe to the free tier, and you'll receive any of my future mailings. Check out my TikTok and Instagram reviews. Same reviews put up on both platforms. I do a comic book review every day. I review just about everything under the sun. I know which side my bread is buttered on, and I do plenty of Marvel and DC, but I try to fit lots of stuff on there. I have a podcast with Claire Napier. It's called Utter Madness. We talk about Top Cow Comics. That's Witchblade, The Darkness, Mark Silvestri, Michael Turner. Lots of great stuff. We have a lot of fun making it. What else is there? Well, I already said check out my Patreon. Check out my work for the Comics Journal. I put up a new review just about every week. I just put up a big article about Batman Year One a couple weeks ago. It's still up there. It's still a great article if you haven't seen it yet. And just have a wonderful day. Take care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to small children and animals. And just have a lovely day.